Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sovereign Spirits, where we explore methods on how to escape the reincarnation cycle, transcend the white light, and use our intention in a willful and powerful way to manifest an afterlife as sovereign spirits. I am here with co-creator and co-host of the show, Wayne Bush.
Hi, Julie. Good to be with you again. Another important episode here.
Yay! All right. Well, please share with us what are we going to be talking about? And just as a reminder, I mean, these episodes we've been doing it's all your research over the last couple decades, and much of this can be found on your website.
That's correct. Trickedbythelight.com, which I initially put up in 2002, I believe. So it's been over 20 years, and there's a lot of, like as you say, a lot of research into what happens after death, especially like in our first episodes, we covered near-death experiences, and then the next ones we did pre-birth memories. And in this episode, we're going to be studying the phenomena of life between lives, or the realm where the spirits spend their, so-called time between incarnations. And so we're going to be like touching on books like Here and Hereafter by Ruth Montgomery, You've Been Here Before by Edith Fiore, Life Between Life by Joel Whitton and Joe Fisher, Conversations with the Spirit Between Death and Life by Dolores Cannon, that's an important one, and Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls by Michael Newton, and Your Soul's Plan by Robert Schwartz. And we're also briefly going to look at the Sumerian texts and the Gnostic texts, as well as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and then probably also mention the work of this Italian regressionist named Calogero Grafassi. So it's going to be pretty good stuff, I hope.
Yes, lots to go over. I'm really glad we're doing these episodes. Just as a reminder, that the link to your website is up on the banner, and I'll link it in the video description as well. If people enjoy reading and going through material in that way, they can do that too.
Sure. So most of these books were by hypnotherapists who took their subjects in between lives. Most people have heard of past lives, but they can also get them in between, like right between when they just died and before they're reborn again.
Right.
And I have a feeling that the system that's in place for processing souls, when it's taken at face value, is probably very similar to these reports, although there's bound to be discrepancies, but I think it very well may be that the real truth of what's happening may only be uncovered if the hypnotherapist is, skilled enough to get past the so-called guides and higher self. It's similar to how David Jacobs has been able to do with his research into alien abductions, and he's found that there are often false screen memory implants that cover up the real event. But,
right.
Yeah. So as I read these accounts, I'm in no way endorsing or condoning this system. It's merely to alert people to what may be going on, the potential dangers of following this course of action, and to point out the potential flaws in the system, and to encourage others to evaluate the evidence themselves, and whether they might want to avoid these traps if that's indeed what they are. So, I mean, to me, the accounts of like over the 4,000 or 5,000 in near-death experiences is on Ender is much more reliable than probably the accounts given through hypnosis from a handful of individuals. But much of what they report could be fanciful imagination or confirmation bias. I mean, I don't really know enough about hypnosis, but it is interesting. That Michael Newton and Dolores Cannon both came out with their books like a year apart, and the information was very similar. They both had years of research on it. So,
well, I know that there's a lot of success with not just past life, but just this current life regression. And there's a family member or a friend that corroborates what's being shared, like they're awake and their friend is being regressed, and they bring back these memories that the patient has forgotten, and the friend is, oh yeah, that's what happened. So I mean,
yeah,
if I don't know, it seems like it's somewhat reliable, well, at least for the current life. So
if nothing else, it's getting the
not past
person
life.
into a very deeply relaxed state where they can remember more easily. And in some
Yeah.
cases, I don't think they're even aware of what they say. Even like you're saying, a lot of this stuff can be corroborated. Like they have
Right.
no idea about, the subject matter they're talking about. They're no expert in military history or anything like that. But then when you do
Right.
research, it's
Right.
like, wow, it's all, corroborated. So,
Yeah. Yeah. All right. This is very
so
interesting.
yeah, so I'm just gonna start out like in 1968, Ruth Montgomery. Now I don't think she's a hypnotherapist. She's like a medium, I believe. But she wrote this book Here and Hereafter, and she has a chapter named Between Lives. And she writes, a prominent psychiatrist who has regressed more than 100 patients through hypnosis during the past 10 years reports that most good subjects can talk as easily about the period between lives as about former earthly incarnation, and that despite widely disparaging religious and cultural backgrounds, all give approximately the same description of the spirit world. In many cases, they express great joy at being dead, stressing the marvelous feeling of being so much more free and alive than when in the physical body. And the psychiatrist said that as soon as he utters some such phrases, now that the soul has left the body, the subject will usually tell the reason for the life just lived, saying, I had to learn to be less selfish, or I had to experience unselfishness so that I could know how important kindness is. When asked the overall purpose of earthly life, the answer often is to learn to love or to become more Christ-like and thoughtful of others. Um, they said their accomplishments sometimes determine whether we go there. And somebody said that they hadn't earned, they were asked about heaven, and they said heaven is somethingness, a lack of a void. And he said, I started out there, we all did, but I've not been there since. I haven't earned it yet. So here's
Huh.
this notion of perhaps, earning your way or karma. And
Mm.
about whether souls must keep reincarnating, this woman said, you can quit if you want, or you can skip it entirely. You need drive and eagerness to try for the beyondness. You can end reincarnation and stay in darkness if you choose. It's up to each soul. Each time that we occupy a body, it's only a second in the expanse of time. We come back
Oh,
each time to accomplish something, to compensate for any harm that we've done to others, and to keep them from being hurt. Maybe that's the only natural death when we don't need to come back anymore. So here they
mm,
are talking about the notion of, graduating or, escaping this wheel of, reincarnation. And,
mm.
it's interesting that the book said the purpose of Earth is to learn to love, when they say there's so much love over there already, and to be thoughtful of others. I mean, I don't know, it
I don't,
seems like
I mean,
we're all connected already.
how do you, how many lives do you need before you learn to love, though? I,
Exactly. And it said that you can end reincarnation and stay in the darkness if you want. I mean, I don't know if they're referring to the void, but
yeah.
yeah. So the next book was Edith Fiore in 1978. You have been here before. And she writes, all that I show you corroborates the findings of Raymond Moody in his book, Life After Life. It's based on it, which is based on interviews with over 100 people who died during operations, illnesses, or accidents. And their descriptions of their experiences before resuscitation are virtually identical to those of my patients under hypnosis, except that many of my patients recall events in the interim between lifetimes, whereas Moody's do not.
Mm.
Um, for obvious reasons, his patients never made the transition complete. Um, interestingly, the Tibetan Book of the Dead also portrays many of the, she says, interestingly, the Tibetan Book of the Dead also portrays many of the same events my patients and subjects have described. So, we are going to touch on the Tibetan Book of the Dead in probably part two. But we probably should have maybe mentioned it in the near-death one too, but because the bardo that they talk about are these states in between lives, after death. And, out-of-body experiencer William Buellman has talked about this at length and says he does not plan on going to the white light after death, but rather the clear light of the void. And actually, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, we should touch on that because it's really important, I think.
Yeah. So clear light of the void, even though the void
Clear
is
light.
described as blackness or darkness, and then they're saying the clear light of this void.
Well, some say it's both light and dark. The void it's a so-called void. The void is a misnomer because it makes people think that it's emptiness. In reality, it's everything that is. it's like very contradictory. We can't think of it in these dualistic terms because it's kind of like non-duality. It's like both light and darkness. You know, it's beyond space and time. It's more like a neutrality or just a both and instead of like an either or thing.
Uh-huh. I've heard it described as everything and nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, oh,
So
that's
void is it's kind of misleading, I think. So the book Life Between Life by Joel Whitton and Joe Fisher was 1986. And it says California hypnotherapist Edith Fiore reported in 1978 that some of her subjects ventured into the interim between lives to find pure energy and light, while others saw beautiful lakes, beautiful scenes, gleaming cities. There was also a mention of encounters with planners or a board of advisors who assisted in the choice of the next incarnation, which in some case preceded the soul hovering over its mother before birth. And it said in 1979, the results of mass hypnotic studies conducted by Dr. Helen Wambach, a San Francisco clinical psychologist, indicated that most people chose to be born even though they would rather remain in the lightness and love of the between life state. And her subjects told of having no gender in the place between lives and mentioned in many cases they had agreed reluctantly to reincarnate after consultation with advisors, a board, or a group of authorities.
hmm.
Yeah, and then it says the decision making is heavily influenced by the members of the judgment board who, mindful of the soul's karmic debt and its need for specific lessons, and that some of we have to be given obstacles to become stronger, more aware, more evolved, more responsible. And one said, there are people I didn't treat too well in my last life, and I have to go back to the earth plane again and work off that debt. And this
Hmm.
time, if they hurt me in return, I'm going to forgive them because all I really want to do is go back home. This is home. And another one said, oh, F, oh no, not this, anything but this. There's no way I could go back in that body. But I had made my choice unwillingly on the advice of the judgment board, and I just had to go through with it. I felt pushed.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yes. And another
Physically
says,
pushed. That's a
he said, I
little,
felt pushed. Another said, it appears that the act of reincarnation can be resisted for only so long. Eventually, there's an accumulation of cosmic pressure that, as the subject testified, coerces the soul to renew its development within the confines of a physical body. Um, Whereas Hindu and Buddhist texts portray mankind strapped to the wheel of rebirth by the thongs of karma, and that's something to mention. I mean, this idea has been around for so long. I mean, even in Hinduism and Buddhism, this idea of being in this reincarnational cycle and you have to get liberated, whether it's through karma or maybe just enlightenment or whatever. It's been around very, very long. But as they
it's just that
say,
the karma, yeah, the karma keeps you on this reincarnation cycle, apparently. But as we've mentioned, it's like if you live this life in a human body, you're going to accumulate this
yeah,
karma. There's no other, it's just
you're
part
here
of
80
being
years or
human.
more,
So how are
sure.
you ever going to get off this
No, it's
wheel?
like Gandhi said, an eye for an eye, leaves the whole world blind or whatever.
Yeah.
So, the book says, whereas Hindu and Buddhist texts portray mankind strapped to the wheel of rebirth by the thongs of karma, Dr. Whitton's subjects present a more instructional view of karma's workings. Picture the entire human race at work in a cosmic classroom where over the course of many lifetimes we set ourselves lesson after lesson. Each one of us is pupil and teacher, and we have the power through our actions to direct our own course of learning. So a little bit of a twist on that one. It's
Hmm.
not as much karma, according to him. Um, so, and it says in the Bardo, Ben was aware of a voice which said, if you do it right this time, things will work out all right. If not, you will require a learning environment of even greater intensity. In other words, the beatings will continue until morale improves, right?
Wow.
Yeah. So, and then in 1993, like as I mentioned, Dolores Cannon and Michael Newton's books, which are very, very popular within the spiritual community. Cannon's book came out in 1993, and Michael Newton's came out in 1994. So I'm going to cover Dolores's first, and then we probably
Okay.
won't get to Michael Newton's material until maybe the second part. I don't know. We'll see.
Okay.
But her book was Conversations with the Spirit Between Death and Life, and just briefly, she was educated and lived in Missouri until her marriage in 1951 to a career Navy man. And she spent 20 years traveling all over the world as a Navy wife.
Hmm.
And so the book mentions the death experience, and she asks what her subject, what happens when somebody dies, and they say, you just rise up and leave it. You go up here in the light. And she asks, what do you do when you're there? And the subject says, perfect all things. And so Dolores says, where do you go if you have to go away from the light? And they say, back to earth. Another one, Dolores was saying, one of the biggest fears people have is that they are so afraid of dying. And the subject says, that's not so bad. That's the easiest thing I'll ever do. It's like the end of all confusion until you start all over again, and then it's more confusion. Then why do people keep coming back? She asks. They say, you must complete the cycle. You must learn all and overcome all the things of the world so you can enter into perfection and everlasting life. Dolores says, that's a big order, though, to try to learn everything. And the subject says, yes, sometimes it's very tiring. And Dolores says, seems like it would take a long time. And they said, well, from where I am here, it all seems so simple. I am in control. For instance, I can understand the fear and the way I feel now. I feel like I couldn't be touched by it, yet there's something about the human person. When you're there, it engulfs you. I mean, it becomes part of you and it touches you, and it's not so easy to stand off and be objective. And
so if you got it, I'm sorry if I'm interrupting. It's
No,
like they're over there, they have it all figured out, but they come here to have it not figured out.
Right. In order to perfect.
To grow, but they're already developed there, but then they come here to grow what?
They're already complete. Well, we're going to get into this notion of, according to these books of Newton and Cannon, of creation of new souls too. So, maybe they're creating these blank souls that are just, completely undeveloped and immature, and begs the question, why would you have to go through thousands of lives and all this suffering just because they wanted to create a new soul or something? It just doesn't make sense. It seems like, why wouldn't you create a soul that's already developed? Like, just, I don't know. It seems like there should be a better system than what we have here. But be that as may, we will trot onward. So Dolores says, what are you going to do now? And he said, I think I'm going to rest. I've got to come back eventually, but I'm going to stay here a while. I'm in the light. It's restful. Can you tell me where this light is? Where all knowledge and everything is known. Everything is pure and simple. There is more pure truth here. You don't have the things of the world to confuse you. You have the truth on earth, but you just don't see it. Dolores says, but you said you have to come back sometime. How do you know that? She said, I was weak. I should have been able to tolerate the pain. I must learn to better withstand it. I could have stayed if I hadn't been so weak. I'm glad I can't remember the pain. I know I need to go back, and I must become complete, whole. Pain is one thing I must overcome. I must overcome all the pains of the world. Dolores says, but experiencing pain is very human, and it's always difficult to do when you're in the body. From the side you're on now, it's easier to look at it in a different way. Do you think that's a lesson you want to learn? I will, yes. It takes me a while sometimes, but I can do anything. I think I should have been stronger. And then she goes on, she says, when you deal with the higher conscious level of your mind and remove yourself to the pure light and the pure thought, the pain ceases to be. Pain is only a lesson. When we learn about pain on the human level, we get frantic and show outward concern for just a moment. By removing ourselves and concentrating and reaching deep and having patience, we can rise above it. So, I mean, what's the point of coming down just so we can rise above it? And Dolores says, does pain have a purpose? And they say pain is a teaching tool. Sometimes it's used to humble certain people. Sometimes a haughty spirit can be brought down and taught to be more gracious through suffering. It may teach them that they must eventually learn to rise above the pain, and then they can deal with it. I don't know. It just seems like it's a...
We come here to be more like we are there.
Right.
More like we already are there. It makes
it's very confusing. It really is. Okay, so she has this section on greeters. And she says, the subject says, there is a period of orientation or reorientation, which can be confusing to some as they figure out where they should go from here. But they needn't worry because help is sent immediately. Usually a handful of souls will come that you have had close karmic connections with in former lifetimes. There's always one or two or even more on hand that are in between incarnations themselves. They will be there to greet you, and the person will recognize them due to his connection with them in the immediate past lifetime. Another thing that causes confusion when you cross over to the spiritual planes is that your memory starts opening up to your past incarnations and your entire karmic picture. That's one of the things we talked about, is that right upon death, we want to set that intention to get our first initial memory of why we incarnated in the first place. But it's nice to hear that the memories do start coming back. I would want to take the reins and do it immediately myself.
I don't know that I'd want all my memories back immediately. The
Just
first
initial ones.
initial one, like who was I
Mhm.
before I first
Right.
came here and why did I come here? That might put things in order for me.
Right. So she
You
says
know?
that's part of the process of remembering all of your karma while you're on that plane, so you can understand what you've just completed and what you still need to work out when you return to Earth again. Dolores says, then it's true that someone always comes when people die, and the subject says yes. And remember that. The subject says yes, it's always true that someone comes when people die, because in Michael Newton's research, we're going to find out that they're contradicting that.
Oh,
Anyways, so it also is contradictory to Daniel Brinkley. His near-death experience, or at least his first one, he said there was no one there to greet him. So I don't know. Dolores said, if they don't know they are dead, are they more apt to be confused? The subject says, yes, that is true. And the helper who is there has to explain to them what is going on and help them through it. After learning what it needs for its next lifetime, it consults with the spiritual masters and starts preparing for its next incarnation. It consults with the spiritual masters to see what kind of situation would be best for the spirit to come back into. So it is interesting that like a lot of these souls probably don't even know they're dead initially. They didn't the death can come so sudden from like a car crash or something. They're just
right.
body, they don't even know it, and maybe they're probably a little confused by it all. So
Oh yeah, I've read and even interviewed people who they come out of their body and they don't realize at first they
yeah,
just feel
that's
the same.
another
Yeah.
factor to take into consideration.
Mhm.
So the subject says that which you expect to find, or that reality you create, you do indeed find. Were they to expect to awaken into perhaps a carnival, then that would be what they would find. Anything is possible if they believe in it. For the most part, what the person expects to be there will be there. If they expect to meet guides or friends along the way to help them toward the light, this is what they shall see. If they were steeped in the belief of damnation and hellfire, and if they believe that they deserve this, this is what they shall also perceive. So he says most of this is based upon the preparation of the individual soul prior to death, which is kind of one of the things we probably wanted to do while we're here, is to try to just deprogram ourselves of all these conditionings we've been taught through religions and what to expect, because these belief systems may be kind of trapping us a little bit.
Right, right.
So yeah, so then there appeared to be this established cycle of constant returning to Earth again after being on the other side. And this is Dolores talking. She says, it seemed to me that if someone were in a place where they could not die, that they would naturally want to remain there forever. And they said, no, you would be bored very quickly. If your lesson of the third grade is over, why would you want to stay in the third grade for the rest of your life? It could be comfortable, but there would be no learning. Dolores says there would be no challenges, and the subject says that's true. Death is necessary in order to progress. Stagnation would occur if there were no death in order to move one to the spirit side. There is an ongoing process which is best suited for the learning of much information. It's just interesting. They talk about climbing these ladders for more advanced lessons, and where each level of experience is growing in awareness from the one below it. So the surroundings, which will be the catalyst for these experiences, will be discarded as the new experiences are needed. And Dolores says well, they need the challenge of something new, a new place. And the subject says new surroundings are very important to progression. And in that vein, there's another subject on these schools. And Dolores says, many times when I regress different subjects, they would not be involved with a life. Their answers would reveal that they were in between on various spirit levels or planes and in different places. The most common of these was the school. I asked for a description. The subject said, it is the school of knowledge. I see the hall. It has tall pillars and it's all in white. Real light, how do I explain it? The light comes from within and without, from everything, and just shines. Do you mean like sunlight? Not that bright, but more lasting. It's very peaceful, very restful, very calm. It's a very nice place to be. Where is this school of knowledge? It's just here. It's on a different vibration from the existence known as Earth. It's on a separate plane of existence. You said this is like a big hall. Are all the classes held in the hall? No, they have classrooms off of it. This is kind of a main walkway, I guess. You can see Anything that you want to see here, just by visualizing it, it occurs. You can make it as nice or as bad as you wish. If you're dealing with a guilty conscience and want to make yourself suffer, you can make yourself do that also. You can make the surroundings look like you want them or the way you have visualized it. Dolores says, who is teaching you? Or asks, who is teaching you? And she says, the masters. Each class has several. They teach you to study oneself. They have these robes and different types of clothing on, or they said whatever type of clothing they want to project is wearing, they'll do it as being part of the type of image they want to project at that particular time. Dolores asks, what are you learning at the school? And she says, I'm studying life experiences and effects. I study long and hard in order to learn and to know. I put the pieces of my experiences together and compile them to make sense of my existence. I ask myself, how do these things affect me? How did I handle them? And here I can analyze, so I go through the situation again to get a truer perspective of what really happened. I try to understand why I acted and reacted in such a way so as not repeat previous errors. We amass great knowledge here of lessons to be learned, karma to be dealt with. We learn many things about dealing with human nature and about the problems that I had to face. And through this, I will learn to grow and expand. And will you face these problems while you're there? No, the next time I'm born, I'm preparing to descend again. Another person is saying, or she asks, is it mandatory that you return to Earth and inhabit a body again, or do you have a choice? No, for there is no have to. It is most appropriate. Yes, then that might be the best thing to do. However, there is no rule that says one has to incarnate. For who is to say that one might choose not to reincarnate forever? It's up to the life force involved. I can stay here and learn, or I can go back. I will probably go back. I look at the piece and I think I'm ready for the challenges. And ask, can you choose the type of person you will be? And she says, so the subject says, you have certain characteristics. You're the sum total of everything you have ever done. And Dolores asks about free will. She says, part of that is each soul has a personality. Because of that, there is free will. And the fact that we know how that person will decide in any given situation because they are that person. Based on what they have done in their other past lives, the personality is very predictable. They can prevent certain things from happening just by changing or going against the character, but it's unusual for a person to change that drastically. And Dolores says, I thought you meant that these things were set up and that was the way they had to be, that you didn't have anything to say about it. And the subject says, you wouldn't learn unless you made your own decisions. You have to handle your own mistakes. Dolores asks, do you think it's already planned out who you are to meet and the people you will have association with? And they say, to some extent, because you have some type of a previous bond with most of the people that you meet throughout your life. You will have things to work out between two or maybe more individuals. Dolores says, many people ask me why we don't remember our past lives. They think it would help a lot if we consciously knew about these karmic connections. The subject says, it wouldn't. It would make things too complicated. Can you imagine how difficult it would be to function in the everyday world if you had the memories of countless past lives constantly bombarding you? You would never be able to concentrate on the lessons you have to work out during the lifetime. And one of the things we talk about is we could at least have the memory that one thing that, I chose to come down here and I remember making that choice. Like when you go to school, you remember, beforehand enrolling or whatever. And that would be nice to have just that. And that can't be too taxing on these pea brains of ours, right?
Right. Just the one memory that, look, I chose to do this for whatever reason. And maybe I don't even need to know the reason. Maybe just as long as I have the memory of, I remember signing up for this. So at least I know that much. This memory wipe stuff is very perplexing.
Yeah, and even Dolores is asking about it. She says, Dolores says, you said you were going to the schools, that you were learning lessons there. Well, if you're able to learn lessons while you're in the spirit world, why is it necessary to incarnate in the physical form at all?
Exactly.
And the subject says, there is great need for this due to the fact that it is like reading a book. When you haven't read a book, the knowledge is within you, but you have not utilized it. And if you do not use this knowledge, it has no worth. You cannot change yourself without experiencing a reason to change. So in other words, and then they go on and they say, you can learn all about how to do something by reading the book, but unless you have the hands-on experience, it doesn't do you a bit of good.
Sure.
Dolores says, they say it's difficult to experience on Earth in the body, that this is a hard way to learn lessons. Do you think that's true? And they answer, it is a hard way to learn lessons, but they are more lasting. If you can learn a lesson through all of the struggles that you go through, it will remain with you. Dolores asks, how many lives have you lived? And she says, I have no idea, 100 maybe, maybe more. I have lost count. Is it hard to keep track? After the first 50 or so, yes. So we just keep coming back here for hundreds of lives, or at least 100.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't feel like humans are all that complicated. We have the same emotions and feelings and struggles and pressures, and I mean, it seems like it would only take maybe even just a handful of lives. I don't know.
Right.
Seems
And as
pretty
we
easy
get
to
into the Michael Newton material, he's saying he's got a subject that took him 5,000 years to overcome jealousy. 5,000 years. I mean, that's really, I don't know. And where does the jealousy come from to begin with? I mean, if did they create an imperfect soul that already has jealousy in it? Or how does one even create jealousy from that soul? I don't know. It's very confusing. And
Hmm.
Dolores asks, have you ever heard of something called the Akashic Records? And they say, yes, the records of life. There are those entities who are the guardians of the records, and they are allowed to read them. Some who have studied and practiced for years have small access to them, but there are very few, and none that I know who are incarnate who have full access to these records, to the full access. Everybody can go to it and refer, though, through it. You turn the pages, and if I'm looking in it, then it reflects what I look for. And if another looks in it, then it reflects what they look for. It's a magical type book. And then Dolores asks this other person, is this school the only place you can learn? They say, no, there are other types of schools and other planes of existence. Everything must be experienced to a certain extent at least once. So as we were saying, there's other planets where maybe the lessons are more kind, not as extreme, may take longer, but hey, if you got eternity, what's the rush, right?
True. And I still have to wonder if these guides and counselors who are planning our lives, um, they're so more advanced than we are, yet they've never been incarnated on Earth. So how we're coming here to have this, advance in our learning, but our own guides and counselors sometimes have never even been here. So that's a little
Sometimes
confusing.
they say they have, but yeah, who's to know? I mean, I'm not sure. Um, Anything, the subject says, anything that you can visualize can be real. For you are the master of your own destiny, of your own house, of your own vessel or receptacle, or any other way you wish to perceive the concept of a spirit being in physical body. You are the master of your body, and you are the master of your destiny. You create that which is manifest in front of you. You are co-creator here. That which you find in front of you is of your own making and creation, whether on the physical or spiritual planes. All must attune to this responsibility, for all are co-creators of their manifest destiny. And so that's one of the things we're trying to do with this channel, is to tell everyone that they are sovereign spirits and that they are the master of their own destiny, and that we just should stop giving away so much of our creative power and decision making to these guides, right?
Yeah.
That try to talk us into, oh, you got to go back for more pain and suffering on earth so you can quote unquote grow and get bigger spiritually. You got to be brighter. So then there's another, they talk about this healing temple, and where the subject says, the different lights are swirling all around me and cleansing me. And this person takes his hand and leads them away from it and says, your soul is cleansed of much negative energy that has been around you. And then there's this tapestry room and the guardian of tapestry. And the guardian says that each thread represents a life. And Dolores says it sounds very complicated. Oh, some of it is complicated, but it makes a beautiful design, an eternal design. And I can see the world beyond that. By looking at this tapestry, I can see any event that has taken place. The grand tour. What do you mean? It's like looking through the tapestry, and I can see people's daily lives, and they're connected as a thread into this tapestry. Now the guardian is explaining that every life that has ever been lived is represented as a thread in this tapestry. This is where all the threads of human life, the souls that incarnate, are connected. It illustrates perfectly how each life is interwoven, crossing and touching all these other lives, until eventually all of humanity is affected. The absolute oneness of humanity is represented by the tapestry. And then they're still talking about the Akashic records and that advanced souls understand. He says some of the records are kept in book form, but those are for souls who are not as highly advanced. And And everyone wouldn't have a thread in this tapestry. No, all life has a thread in this tapestry, but only advanced souls are able to understand the concept of the tapestry and have access to it. Lesser developed souls have Akashic record books they can look through. It would be like a child going into a college library. They should go to the children's section of a local library instead. He says he's discussing my soul's growth and he's sort of calling me for task on it. He says I was such a ray of light and I had allowed myself to grow dim. That's why I had to go back to the earth school. So you can make amends? Well, by understanding universal laws and love, I could gain my light back. It's easier to go through the earth school than to incarnate on other dimensions. It's quicker. So they make you feel like, hey, it's going to be a lot of pain and suffering down earth, but hey, you can accomplish so much more in a life on earth than these other lives, so you should do it. um, so yeah, there's this tapestry room, a temple of wisdom, and a library, and these spirit guides and guardians of the library, and it's interesting stuff. He says anything for the soul's growth is allowed. That's why sometimes you see children born with horribly disfiguring diseases. Everything's allowed. It's all for the same purpose of reaching spiritual perfection. So that's what they're saying. All this, man, all these atrocities on earth, all these cruel sufferings of,
Yeah, I still wonder because some of the stories you hear is that you're perfected when you're there. Everything is perfect
yeah.
and you know everything and it's all blissful and love
There
already.
does seem to be contradictions.
Some contradictions. And then I do wonder, so the evolution, so we're just evolving for how forever? Like what we talked about, when
Right.
is enough and for what, to what end?
Exactly. It's I don't know. When is enough enough? How bright do you need to be? How big do you need to be? It seems like there's an ego problem there, like you're just greed or you need more and more and more. And what's the point? I mean, is it competitive on the other side or something? I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
I don't get that. And then there's this viewer or viewing room. And when it's time for them to reincarnate again, we do process them. He says they all go to the computer room, which is an area where they can be reevaluated. The computer room sets them up and matches the time when an incarnation is going to be taking place and what type of lessons that incarnation will teach. They are shown how they can use that lifetime quickly. But he says this is all going to be changing very shortly because the earth is going to be too highly evolved for these spirits. So we're going to be shipping these souls out to a laughs. And he says, it's like, okay, you had your chance here. Next boat is going to Arcturus. Now, the higher vibrational souls are different. When they cross over, they usually head for the Temple of Wisdom and Knowledge because they've been there before. This could be where the schools are located. They bypass all of that negativity. And he says, then there are the mid-level souls. They like to manifest themselves in happy situations with their families that have crossed over. There are houses and lake resorts and boats for them. Similar to their lifestyle on Earth, you mean? There are all different types of houses built up along one of the banks of the lake. And on one of the steep hillsides, there are all beautiful houses. And this is where people live if they choose to, especially people that have a hard time adjusting to the astral world. So they can live in these houses. And then there's a low astral, mid astral, and upper astral. And the mid astral are these types. It's kind of like suburban America. There are nice houses and people are basically talking with their friends and their relatives and they're having good old memories. Sometimes spirit guides come into a house and talk to them and tell them they should start preparing for their next lifetimes. And they say, well, we just want to enjoy our families a little bit longer. Do we have time? Is it really necessary for us in our spiritual growth? He says, well, yes, you do need to go up to the temple. And they're kind of fearful. It's the attitude of, I don't know about that. So even there, in the astral, they're still like we're saying, why do I need to grow? And we're having fun here with our family and friends.
So is this the cosmic pressure that we've
pressure
read about? So it's these entities or these guides or counselors, etc., always trying to persuade us to go. Why can't we make our own decision without this persuasion?
Right. And wouldn't we feel it from within, just so be so obvious that we need to do it, you would think, if it's a true necessary thing. Yeah, there are gardens and the prototypes of all the beautiful mountains, oceans, streams, lakes, and waterfalls. They're all there and they're just wonderful. There's this beautiful jewel-like city where the Temple of Wisdom is located. There are mountains surrounding it where some of the people that are upper astral entities live, but they come into the temple. They're souls that like that sense of comfort of home life and family life. He He says many very evolved souls like this type of life. This is why they have their little villa houses on the slopes of the mountains. It's beautiful. Dolores says, it sounds like the spirits are going to whatever area they are familiar with, and they won't go to the next level until they're ready. Is that correct? He says, yes. Or it says, right. He says that you have to advance to a certain level, but he says the upper astral is where you want to go when you come over here. He says, this is the place. It's just gorgeous. The mid astral, it's important. That's where a majority of the souls come to. They're neither good nor bad. They're not degenerate. They just want to see their family and their friends, and they need time. But when it's time for them to go up to the computer room, it's time for them to go. Dolores asks, does everyone go to the computer room eventually? Oh, yes, they all go. This is the processing room. But he says the lower entities have only a few more years to incarnate through all this negativity. He can't show me the computer room. It's a processing room where basically only the spirit guardians are allowed. This is the processing room where souls are lined up and matched with the appropriate bodies for them to incarnate in. It just reminds me of this like Star Trek episode about Return of the Archons, and it's like, I don't know, it just seems only the spirit guardians are allowed access to that computer room.
It's a computer room, so these spirits need this technology to figure this out, I guess.
That's a little, makes you wonder, things that make you go, It says, this is the processing room where souls are lined up and matched with the appropriate bodies for them to incarnate in. But he says it's different when a spirit from the upper astral wants to incarnate. It's like he has good documentation, so he's given priority. I mean, some of them are just shipped out. He says much of the pain and suffering of the people that have died of famine in Ethiopia and such things as that has been caused by past lifetimes of complete indulgence. He said these lives are being processed into higher spiritual energy for them. Dolores says then they're put into a life where they wouldn't live for very long, just long enough to try to repay some of those indulgences. And the answer is, the subject says, to suffer, to teach them that they have to grow spiritually. Interesting. Another says, he says we go beyond the upper astral and we go into spiritual rejuvenation and learning to be a universal spirit. Then we're just not tied to the astral areas of Earth. He says each lifetime teaches you a different quality that you need to learn in your quest for perfection. You don't just have several lifetimes. Some people go for 3, 4, 5, 600. He says some advanced souls can do it maybe 10 lives, but the average number is about 120. 120 lives. There you go. That's the average. This section talks about to be one with God. And Dolores asks, do we have to live more than one life in order to advance? And the subject says, you need not live any lives at all if you so desire. It is not necessary to incarnate. It is simply more efficient. Dolores asks, more efficient for what? For you, for your time, for your learning experiences. It is more complete learning to incarnate than to remain spiritual. These are shortcuts, if you will, to the ultimate destination.
Why? What's the rush? What's the rush? Or you have eternity.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
You got eternity.
Fast track.
Yeah, are they, I don't know. It seems like there's a character flaw there if they're just so, I don't know. And Dolores says, and what is the ultimate goal? And they say, to be one with God, to join with God again and reach perfection. And then you don't have to come back anymore. How many spirits or souls reach the highest level of these planes? Many have already joined God and never need to return to lower planes again. If we didn't incarnate, how would we reach God? Through other methods, through helping, assisting incarnated beings, through being a guide, a teacher, a helper, a friend on the spirit planes. There are many different methods. Will the soul eventually go to all these different dimensions or planes? That is what we are all working for. That is the ultimate goal. The ultimate plan is the oneness, a reunion with God.
Well, if we were already there, I don't get it. So we were already there and united and one with God.
Yeah. Right.
And we exit just to
follow all this stuff. Just to you can go back. Exactly. It seems like a contradictory, what do you call that? Circular reasoning or something like that. You're already there, but it's like you're going to come down and suffer and devolve just so you can evolve and get back to where you were. She says, what is the purpose of reincarnation? To correct what you did in the past? The purpose is to learn more, to always learn more, for never can you learn all there is to know in one simple lifetime. But you're learning about stuff on Earth, right? It's like, what's the point? The purpose of living again is not to correct, but to add to. Your knowledge cannot be complete with one simple lifetime. Many lifetimes must be lived to enable you to completely understand those lessons which you yourself assign to yourself. The experiences of life and rebirth should be viewed with a more positive outlook. That is, one of learning and loving, and not of punishment and sorrow. It is all in attitude.
Learning what? Knowledge or experiencing? Because it is, do
Both,
we
I
look?
guess, is what they're saying.
Because I don't know. This life I don't know about you, but I've felt physical pain, heartache, sadness, excitement, love. I mean, I don't know that I haven't experienced, I don't know that I'm missing something. In one life, I feel like I've lived and experienced all these different
Right,
emotions. I
we
don't know why I need
understand.
100 or more lives to, I don't know. It just doesn't add up for me.
Uh, doesn't add up for me either. And it just makes you wonder. I mean, sure, there are certain things you can experience as a person of a different race or a different sex or a different part of the world. I mean, sure, there's variances, but in general, the human condition is pretty universal, right? We
Right.
all are suffering. We all experience the heartbreaks that you mentioned and the struggle. So, um, yeah, so they're saying people have bad lives is because they're not dealing with the problems that are thrust out, problems that they themselves help to choose. They think that because they have no control over what happens to them, why should they have to work at it? And so the subject says, one learns what is perfect by experiencing that which is not. So it is as important to learn what is not perfect as it is to learn what is. There cannot be the understanding of that which is given until there is experience that which is taken. And so that's one of the theories we put out there, is that we come here to know thyself. And in order to know thyself, you try to split. God maybe split itself into different, to understand what it is not. So there's a separation there and probably a lowering frequency. So if God is truth and perfect, and then it's looking at what is not, then all of a sudden now you have something that's not real, it's artificial, it's of a lower frequency.
Right. But according to these guides, you don't have to reincarnate on Earth to experience what you are
Right.
not, because there's other ways to do that.
Yeah, it seems like the suffering is an extreme. In other words, why can't you just experience the lack of joy? Whatever source is or whatever. It's like, does it have to go to such an extreme that you're just screaming out in pain and suffering endlessly? It's not just a momentary thing in a lot of cases here.
Yeah, and I again, I keep going back to this thought that why are they trying to convince us to go? What's in it for them? That why don't they just let us go the long way, like they're doing, or have done other ways places to incarnate, or not reincarnate at all ever. It sounds like you could just be over there and be a guide and be a helper and whatever, and
Well,
you're
one
still
of
going
the
to evolve.
things I suspect possibly what could be happening is like, okay, we are supposedly in this world of duality, this realm of duality, where you have, yin and yang, and there's positive and negative, and like maybe the universal laws are for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So if you want, in order to experience these extreme highs and joys, there has to be something being experienced that's an equal, lack of joy, or actually beyond that, suffering and torment. And so maybe they're aware of that. And so they're using that knowledge and trying to hide it from us and getting us to be the sacrificial dupes that go down and experience that suffering and pain so that they can stay up there in that higher realm and continue to experience the bliss.
Right, right.
And that is one possible scenario, which ties into the loosh and that scenario. But
Mm-hmm.
too much probably for this episode right here. So it says, there is no rule, they go on, they say, there is no rule which says that the bad must be experienced. There is, however, the reality of the insight which comes from experiencing the one in order to fully understand the other. This is not a rule, this is a fact. Dolores says, yes, I've heard it said that you cannot appreciate happiness unless you've known sadness, the opposites of everything. Then there's a section on guides, which is very important, of course. And it says almost every culture in the world has beliefs in guardian angels or protector spirits. Do they really exist? And the subject says, there are guardian spirits, usually as someone that you have had a close bond with before, and they are attending school or whatever on the spirit plane. They are helping you go through your learning period and helping protect you. These are serving their purpose on the spirit level. Are they assigned to a certain person? They can choose their own affinities. They are with you. And you're not alone when you enter the physical body. No one is ever alone. The aloneness is a walling of oneself away from others. Do they always have your best interests at heart? Most of the time, the ones that surround you do, yes. You must learn to protect yourself from those who perhaps do not. So she's saying that there could be ones that don't have your best interests. Dolores asks, is your own personal guide powerful enough to keep other influences away? Yes, as long as you also learn to surround yourself with what is good. This will keep away anything that is negative. There is no good or bad. There is only positive and negative. Any experience that is learned from is never negative. Dolores says, but you know, humans, they can be fooled. We are not perfect. Otherwise, we would no longer enter the body. How can we know if it is our guide that is trying to influence us and not be fooled? The subject says, if it is from your guide, it will feel very right. He will never make you do anything. He would only suggest. If force is involved, it is definitely not a positive entity, because then your free will is overridden. So if that's the case, then what do we make of these near-death experiences where half of them, or whatever, roughly speaking, are forced back against their will back into their body? And right here, she's saying that, you know, force is involved. It's definitely not a positive entity because your free will
Right.
is.
That's makes sense. Common sense.
Yeah. And so they say you make conscious decisions and are not being told to do this or that, for this is a human endeavor as well. The guides do not run the show from the sidelines, as some seem to think. They have their part to play and you have yours. It's a mutual consensus agreement, a partnership between spiritual and physical. They do their work and you do yours. Dolores asks, is there a difference between a guide, a counselor, and a spirit? I've heard these terms used at different times. The guides are spirits. A counselor is of a higher order than a guide. A counselor has much more knowledge and experience from which to draw. What if they decide they want to wait or they don't want to go in right at that time? The time for procrastinating is already past when you have set up the process for re-entering the physical plane. Before you decide to enter the physical plane, you can spend as much time on the spiritual plane as you wish. When the point comes when you decide it's time for you to re-enter the physical plane, once you make that decision, it's set into motion. Then you're stuck with your decision because your energy starts flowing in that direction to be redirected back into the physical plane. It's just a force of the universe that once you start the process, you have to follow it through. So maybe that's what we're seeing with the near-death experiencers that are forced to come back, is maybe they've already made this agreement to do this life and set that intention, but it seems like they ought to be able
Wouldn't that
to.
be within their own spiritual energy? Why do they need some other energy or entity to push them? That doesn't
I
sound
know,
right.
I know it doesn't. It really doesn't. Um, there's a section on stillborns, which we won't touch on. There's this God concept, and the subject says, one of the major things in the next stage of human development is to realize that everyone is in charge of their own fate, that what they desire to come pass is what comes to pass. And who or what makes this allowance or approves of this? This is done by the councils who govern the universes. Each universe has a central council, and then there are local councils. Dolores asks, what about us as individual souls? Do you have information about how we were first created? We were merely given personalization. We are merely pieces of God whom he has given personalization to. Why did we divide off from God, if that's a correct term? This is merely a part of the overall plan, the grand divine plan, which only God himself knows in fullness. Many know small details, but none except God himself knows in completeness. You're speaking of God as though he's separate from us, and yet you say it takes all of us to make up God. Can you explain? You say that he loves us. How can this be if he is not a separate entity from us? First of all, God is not separate from us. He is the subject saying this. He is intimately joined with us. Perhaps it would be clarified to understand the blood system in the human body, which is made up of individual cells or aspects. The system itself could not be whole without the individual hemoglobins and so forth. However, each hemoglobin is not complete without being in the system. Thus, all is one and one is all. Each cannot exist without the other. There's a section on like evil and the devil and the idea that thoughts are things and thoughts are energy and real manifestations, which is kind of interesting. And they say they're talking about the devil, and it said the subject said it came from the imagination. It was conjured, and so roams the world, devouring innocent babes, debauching, raping, pillaging. This is evil incarnate. The excuse is to hide from responsibility. Then it comes from the mind of the persons. That is correct. It comes from the inner desires of the people and not from some outside force, for there is no such entity roaming the universe. There is simply a lack of responsibility on those who wish to assign the devil his blame. There's another section on elementals who feed upon feeling energies. And then there's white light to exercise. It kind of sounds like a type of spell or something, but it says, I've heard that white light is very effective to exercise these elementals. Yes, it is effective for protection, particularly against or not against. That is a bad word. It can be used for protection when dealing with people whose auras seem to clash with your own. I've heard of what they call psychic vampires, which would be another person who absorbs your energy and makes you feel very weak or drained. That's not a very good term, but do you know what I mean? Yes, it's a good description for your language. These psychic vampires are imbalanced themselves and they need to work on that. So they're, even in this work, they're talking about these psychic vampires that steal your
Right.
energy.
Right.
Kind of like archons or demons or any other
Mm-hmm.
kind of word you want to attach to them, I guess. And then section on planning and preparation. Dolores says, many people just want to go right back into life again and don't want to learn anything. That is true. There are some unfortunate souls that insist on keeping themselves chained to the wheel of karma. But the more development you go through when you are on this side, the more it can liberate you from past causes. Then you can go on to bigger and better things so as your karma, so far as your karma is concerned. So they're almost saying that you're better off to be on the other side, you know, where you can get more development. I don't know, I guess there's a balance between the two, but I think this is Dolores saying, she says, well, I've also been told that when it is your real spirit guide, he will never try to make you do anything. No, never. They'll just say, you have asked for my advice and this is what is best course of action, but the choice is yours. If you prefer to do something else, then we will work with that choice of action instead.
Oh, well,
Yeah. Yeah, and Dolores says, I've been told that if there's any kind of force involved or if someone tries to make you do something, it is not for your own good. That is true. These concepts are one of the underlying structures of the universe.
well, then,
Yeah. Why would we
then
force back?
we don't have to come back to,
The near
according
death.
to the person.
Hmm.
Yeah, the
Right.
near-deathers who were forced or manipulated. So something is definitely amiss there.
Right. And so there's this section on karma, and it says, I'm looking at karmic connections. Can you, or I guess it's Lauren, can you explain what that means? Through the cycle of life, certain connections between certain groups of people appear again and again in the various permutations. For example, in one life, a person might be your mate, in another life, one of your parents, or in another life, a child, a good friend. These connections reappear in various lifetimes and are sometimes strengthened and sometimes weakened, but they're always growing. And eventually, when we all reach the ultimate source, the connections have developed to the point, if the desire is there, we can form an entity greater than ourselves with all of us being part of it. Dolores says, I have heard it is called one of the universal laws because there's no way you can escape from the karma. You have to pay it back. Subject says it is being worked out all the time. Just the act of breathing works out karma. Regardless of what you do, you're always working out past karma and creating future karma. This is the cycle of life. And this, he said, when you reach the higher, what now?
So you're always creating future karma.
You're right. You're always, just by breathing, you're creating karma. When you reach the higher levels of karma, you no longer have to go through physical lifetimes to work it out. You can do it on the spiritual plane and still be working towards the ultimate. And even when you reach the ultimate, your karma will be influencing and including other universes in the working out of the complex tapestry of the universes. It is not to be considered a prison. It is just a natural cycle that you can grow and develop, though to become your ultimate self. Dolores says, many people say they just don't want to have to come back and do it again. They are still immature. They have much growing to do in their grand cycle. Dolores says, I think most of the time people think of karma as if they have hurt someone in the past, then they have to pay for it now. That is an immature view. That is only an aspect of it. To liken it to your life cycle, when you are a child, you think of punishment as always being bad because you did something you were not supposed to do. Later, you realize it was helping to teach you what you should do to be able to survive and live well. Later on, when things good or bad happen to you, you realize it is because of a mistake that you have made in the past, and you are now living through the consequences of your mistake, or because it is a mistake someone else has made. Then when you live further on and you make fewer mistakes, your life settles down into a comfortable pattern. These people who speak of karma as relating to something bad they have done in the past are at the stage where they are looking at it as punishment. They should be looking at it as a teaching tool to help them to learn to grow and become better. They are still young in their cycles of lives.
Hmm.
So there
Yeah,
seems
so it's an immature soul who doesn't want to come back here. But we also heard that you don't have to come back here. You can grow on the other side without coming back here. So
yeah.
I don't. Again, kind of contradictions here, conflicting
Yeah,
views.
this is true. NDEs and the light as a barrier. Doris says people have near-death experiences and they sometimes describe the same scenes. Yes, what they're describing is what they see up to the approach to the barrier between the physical and the spiritual. The approach up to this barrier is usually very similar because you must go through the same types of energy fields to cross over to the spiritual side. But once they get past what is usually described as a bright light at the end of a tunnel, this bright light is the barrier itself, then what they see differs according to their individual development. Dolores says they have described seeing scenes and people, and sometimes it is like going through a tunnel, but all these things are leading up to the barrier. Right, it is to help get them prepared in the quickest amount of time for the shock they are going through. The act of leaving the body is a very natural act, it is like breathing. But the act of passing from the physical side to the spiritual side can be a shock to the system. And these scenes that they see are to help impress upon them the fact that they are getting ready to cross over and to help them to brace themselves, so to speak. Dolores says, then once they go past that light, they cannot come back into the physical body at that point. That is correct. When they recross that light, it will be for entering another body. Dolores says, I've been told that there is a cord that is supposed to connect the spirit to the body, what we call the silver cord, right? In the Bible. Yes, and when you go through that bright light, it severs the cord because you are going through an intense energy field. The cord that connects the astral body to the physical body is the type of energy. When you go through the energy barrier, it is dissolved. Dolores says, then the people who describe near-death experiences only go that far. They say they feel like they are being pulled toward the light and then they come back. Apparently, they have not gone far enough. The subject says, it was not yet their time to cross over. Now, when they do die, they will still feel the same pulling sensation, but this time they will complete the transition. When they go through the barrier, all they see is bright energy, and they feel like they are being cleansed because the energy is adjusting their own spiritual vibrations to be compatible with whatever level they have attained. So what is on the other side of the white light? If that they're saying you got to pass through the white light before it's severed, well, does that imply that what's beyond the white light is not white light? It's something more? Or
And then you're reincarnated. Didn't the patient say you're reincarnated after that, or you're being prepared for your next life? You have to go through there to be prepared for your next life, I think.
Right. And yeah, and then there's this section on imprinting, and I don't know how much to go into that. The subject says, the souls who decide to go down and have another cycle of life in your time are either foolhardy or brave, depending upon their viewpoint. Some of them do it just out of duty because they know they need to go through a certain number of lives to be able to develop to a certain point. Most of these are the ones that are rather dull and plodding and conventional in your world. Other souls who are more advanced do it with both eyes open, knowing full well it will be difficult, but they know that it will advance their karma since they are going into that life already advanced, and they know they will be able to do 2 or 3 lifetimes worth of advancement in one lifetime. This is possible by going down at this particular time when it is difficult to advance spiritually in the materialism of your world. These more advanced souls are able to stay in touch and keep in tune, and they do much spiritual advancement because of the work they have put into it. So
what's the rush again? What's the rush? I don't understand
they're in a
that.
hurry. Well, I guess you could liken it. People sometimes, and I did it too when I went to school. Sometimes I would take on a heavy load because I wanted to just get it over with. I wanted to get done with it. I hated going to school, so it's like, all right, I'm going to take as many classes as I can right now.
Well, we have eternity, so why don't we take the easiest road possible? Why do we need? What do we?
You would think so. I would think so.
Again, it's not.
Well, because they say they like being in the spiritual realm better. It's more loving, and so they really don't like dropping down to the physical.
And then we have to be
so
convinced.
they're like, okay, well, I don't want to. Since I hate going to the physical world, let me just get it out of the way and do as much as I can real quickly. And maybe that's their thinking. But you're right, we got all of eternity. So why subject yourself to that extra suffering and pain each time? It's doesn't make sense. So in the end, basically, Dolores writes, "It is amazing that all the information in this book was obtained from many different people who did not know each other. They were of various religions and occupations, yet in spite of their differences, the information they gave while in deep trance does not contradict, but rather complements each other. In many places, it fits so well when combined that it almost sounds as though it came from one person instead of several. This is an amazing phenomenon in itself, that when put together, it creates a solid book of cohesive information. To me, this is proof that they were seeing and reporting similar scenes when regressed to the so-called dead state. If they all see the same things, then I believe the afterlife must be a very real, identifiable place with definite rules and regulations and a hierarchy that keeps it all in order." And I want to say that, I really liked Dolores's work. I have like pretty much all her books, and she was always one of my favorite researchers or whatever. And she asked some really great questions of her subjects. And so I'm not like in any way throwing shade at Dolores herself, God rest her soul, that she's passed on. But we're just looking at the answers she's being told from these subjects and what's supposedly going on over there and that thing. So I just wanted to make that clear, so that's pretty much the Dolores Cannon part. She only wrote one book, unfortunately, on the Between Lives state. In this next episode, we're going to be delving into like Michael Newton's books, Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls, which I think are even more revealing, some of the stuff that they say. And oh my God, if there's any, I wish you would watch part two. If there's only one part you're going to watch, part two is more important probably than part one. And I'm just going to give you like a little taste of what some of it is. And so a subject said, "I think something is pulling me to my proper level of travel and trying to relax me." And he's talking about leading me and he's taking me, and then his Uncle Charlie appears, and like then Uncle Charlie is leaving him. Why is he going away? And he says, "They're sending images into my mind. I'm being pulled along by a magnet. I just enjoy the ride. I'm riding on a wave, a beam of light. I must go with the wave bands of light. They do it all for you, the ones in control. I don't really know. I'm being pulled and I'm supposed to go with it." Another subject mentioned the staging area reminded him of a hub of a great wagon wheel. And another related, "I'm moving along in a chain of some kind, as if I'm weaving through a series of connecting links, a foggy maze, and then it opens up. After a while, I see nests of people, like hives. I see them as bunches of moving lights, fireflies." Another soul talked about these cones. Well, the cones do assist us, and they're cylindrical and bright. We can feel all our thoughts being expanded, then drawn up, and return back with more knowledge added. And Dr. Newton says, "I wonder if this cone is brainwashing your original thoughts." He says, "We are not brainwashed." He goes, "We aren't brainwashed." And later on, when describing the life selection process, another client reported, "Some of us have to be giving a push when they think we are ready again. After some more indoctrination, Mark realized he'd been wrong about his abilities and finally went back to Earth." And Dr. Newton says, "Indoctrination, this makes me think of coercion. It's not that way at all. Mark was just discouraged and needed the confidence to keep trying." So it's like, Dolores and Michael Newton are both questioning some of these answers they're getting. Like, it sounds like coercion and doctrinization and doctrination.
Right.
For some reason, I can't say that word. And it's just interesting that they themselves were like, not like some of the answers weren't all adding up. And and Dr. Newton says, "Are you telling me that a soul may show you one face at the gateway to the spirit world and another image later in a different situation?" "That's right." And he's like, "How do you see individual souls within the clusters?" "As lights. I see masses of dots hanging in clumps as hanging grapes all lit up." And it's like, "Give me an example of what the whole thing looks like to you from a distance." "A long glowworm, its sides bulging in and out. The movement is rhythmic. After a while, I see nests of people." "You mean groups of people?" "Yes, like hives. I see them as bunches of moving lights." And there's a section where he talks about rebellious souls. He says, I have a few clients who left the council chamber a little unsettled. These are souls who feel they could have presented themselves a little better to a particular elder. There are other uncommon cases, especially with young rebellious souls, where I have had the impression they are fighting what they call an act of contrition by standing in front of the elders. The following quote is an example. I get a little upset with the all-knowing ones. They lull you into complacency because they want you to spill your guts out to them. Sure, I made a lot of mistakes, but it's their fault in sending me to Earth in a body that got me into trouble. When I complain about Earth, they don't level with me completely. They are stingy with information. I tell them that life makes you take risks, and my director talks to me about moderation. I said to him, that's all very well for you to say sitting here safe and comfortable while I'm fighting to survive down in a war zone. These immature souls do not realize that to be on a council, an elder has survived many war zones. So anyway, that's some of what we're going to get into in the next episode, as well as the Sumerian texts, which describe heaven as a just matrix where the Anuna gods rule over us, and the Gnostic texts, which describe the receivers of the light, which are the receivers of the sun and receivers of the moon, and how the light's taken into this treasury of light, and there's Melchizedek purifies, and it talks about how souls are refashioned into men and animals and cattle. And yeah, it's just some of the stuff we're going to look at.
Okay. Yeah. Wow, that was a lot of material. Very, very enlightening.
Yeah, there's enough, red flags and warnings. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I want to be optimistic. I don't like to be critical, but I think you need to be balanced. You just can't trust, like they say, trust and
Well, yeah, I mean, like you said, Dolores is even asking these questions that we're asking, and we're getting these accounts of deception. I mean, if sure there's some good, good guides and honest ones, but there are also those who aren't, apparently. So shouldn't we be planning for that and protecting ourselves against that? And we at least need to be aware of it.
Exactly. That's all I'm trying to do is make people aware of the full, complete body of information, not just what so many out there are pushing as love and light only, when there's definitely a yin and yang to it all. So
I guess the ones that are doing the deceiving out there would want us to just put all of our defenses down and just assume, oh, we cross over, it's all love and light, nothing to worry about. We can just walk off and trust anyone that comes up to us, any guide.
right, and there's a certain amount of deception and quote unquote evil that happens down here. So why would we just be so assuming that it's all rainbows and unicorns and happiness on the other side, when they're the ones that are planning our next incarnation down here? They're fully aware of what's going on down here on Earth, all the wars, all the suffering, but they're saying it's for our own good. It's for our spiritual growth and for our development, our evolution, and our perfection. And I guess it's up to people to say, does that make sense?
Although, now I don't think I heard any of those examples saying that was for entertainment, but I know that some of the NDEers come back and say they've been told, oh no, this is a game, it's for entertainment purposes, just for experiences. It's not really to learn per se, it's just to have some experiences and some fun.
A little bit in the Michael Newton books, they don't necessarily talk about entertainment. They do talk about it as life as a big drama, a big stage, a big play, and there is a little bit of that aspect to it. But yeah, for the most part, they don't say this is entertainment. But I look at it as like as above, so below. Everything that's down here must come from somewhere, and so entertainment is such a huge, enormous part of life here on Earth, that I feel it must be something to it, that there is an aspect of entertainment. And like you mentioned, that one near-death experiencer, I believe David was his name, he asked, what is the meaning of life? When he was in the white light on the other side, he said, what's the meaning of life? And they said, for the entertainment of the spirit realm. I mean, that was just one answer given to one person, but it does make you wonder.
Yes, it does.
And as eternal spirits, maybe that's what it ultimately comes down to, is entertainment and just experiences, adventures, creative aspects of expression. I don't know.
Well, another interesting episode to be sure. I appreciate you sharing all of your research with us, with
Of
me again.
course, of course. I appreciate you helping me do this and giving
Yeah.
your input as well. It's very insightful. And
All
you've
right.
interviewed, I don't know, hundreds of people, many with near-death
Yeah.
experiences of their own. So I mean, so that's one of the reasons why you sought me out. Someone recommended you look at my research because you were very much questioning the whole reincarnational process. So
Well, yeah. More and more. I already had it questioned the need for it. And I was a little bit in denial that it was a part of our reality. I was like, I
yeah,
don't
of
know.
course.
But then
Yeah,
after doing these interviews and reading, it's like, okay, I guess this is part of our reality. And how do I not come back here?
exactly. That's what this channel is all about.
Yeah. And
You explore that
yeah, I
further.
do. I appreciate all that I'm been learning with you. It's been a fun ride so far.
Well, I'm learning a lot from you as well, for sure. So hopefully others out there are at least considering some of this information. Like we're not trying to say this is the truth and we are right and this is the only way it can be and we know everything. We're just wanting to get input from others too as to what they feel about it. And maybe we learn, I know I do learn from others out there too. So
Yeah. Yeah. Always learning. And yeah, I appreciate it because there was a point where I felt like I hit a wall and it's like, I don't know how much further I can go. And then I met you and things started opening up a little bit more. And yeah, so
that's
it's
why
like,
I got into this as a researcher. I mean, in my early 20s or whatever, I mean, I was into Christianity, and then when I got up around 30 or something, I started to get more, I left Christianity and got more into the quote unquote New Age movement where I was reading everything about reincarnation. Any book I get my hands on, I was just reading stuff. And, I got into David Icke and certain authors. And at some point, they just weren't talking about the stuff that I was wondering about. Like, okay,
mhm,
but what's the meaning of the soul and the spirit and reincarnation and all this stuff? And at that time, nobody was talking about. I mean, until I heard John Lear on the Art Bell show that said that the light was a trick and don't go to the light, then that made me start looking at the entirety of both sides. And nobody was talking about the dark side of the light, pun intended. So I'm like, well, I actually remember thinking maybe this is all everything is, solipsism. Like this is all my creation. It's all for me. Like I chose to come down here and have this experience like a virtual reality game. I'm like, if that's the case, then I can't sit there and wait for somebody else. I can't wait for David Icke to write a book about it, the soul trap. And we finally did 20 years later or whatever. But I took it upon myself. It's like, I guess I got to go out there and do it. And that's
right,
what kind of the thing we're talking about is not looking for an external savior, just taking your own sovereignty and taking control of it yourself. And so that's why I did all this, because nobody else was researching and getting into it.
right. Yep.
Thankfully, there are others, and maybe I didn't even know. I know Val Valerian had written in his book like Matrix 2 about the light trap into this deception, but it was like just a page or a paragraph. I mean, nobody was just dedicating an entire work to it.
Right.
So
It's so important. It's so important. Um, all right, so I guess we'll close out. We're hour and 15 or 20 or something right now. So
great.
it's a good time to close out. And thank you everyone for watching. This has been Julie McVeigh
And
and
Wayne Bush, and we
with
appreciate
Sovereign
yeah,
Spirits. Yes, we appreciate you watching. If you did enjoy this discussion, please give it a thumbs up. And if you like this type of content, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, and then you'll be alerted to future content that's uploaded. We hope you're having a great day or evening, wherever you are on the planet.
bye.
Till next time. Bye.